There are two types of people in this world. People who watch the same movies over and over again, and those who are abhorred by the idea. I tend to fall into the latter category, and it's kind of the same with watches. Usually, when I let a watch go, I don't look back. I mean, there's like an endless stream of watches being released every other week. Why worry about something from the past, right? But to my surprise, there's been one exception to this rule. So in this video, I'm gonna talk about the one watch that got away and how after many years, it finally made its way back into the collection. If you know this channel, you might think you know the answer. It's the Alpinist, right? Well, you're not completely wrong, but in this case, you're incorrect. It's true, one of my earliest watches was the SARB 017 Alpinist. See, I kind of knew I liked that watch before I even understood why. I was drawn to that gorgeous sunburst green dial with the golden numerals, but shortly after owning it, I started to talk myself out of it. I didn't really know back then that you're supposed to buy watches with the heart and not the head. And the chatter in the head was saying things like, you don't need a green dial, it's impractical. You should sell it, buy something more versatile. So I overthought it and out of the collection it went. Pretty much as soon as I sold it, I started to miss it. And when I would scroll through Instagram, catch the glimpse of an Alpinist, my heart would sink. I missed my watch. But my ego wouldn't let me buy it back because that would be admitting that I was wrong. You know, back then, I think you could get them on Amazon for like $350 all day. But by the time that gnawing feeling had gotten the best of me, the price had shot up to like over $800 for a used one. That hurt. So what I ended up doing was buying a new SPB210 instead. I'd convinced myself that the gold PVD case now matched the gold numerals, but we got a new problem because when Seiko went Prospex with the Alpinist, they also made some unfortunate little tweaks. The Prospex writing on the dial didn't bother me as much as some other folks, but they did add a white date wheel instead of the original black one. And then to add insult to injury, they slapped a Cyclops over it to magnify the mistake. So I had to rectify this situation. So I got the torch out, melted the Cyclops off, and then I took the movement apart and swapped in a black date wheel. Now, word of warning, this wasn't like a level 1 watch mod. You run the risk of doing some damage. So only attempt it if you have a bit of experience under your belt. But the result I thought looked superb, and I was left with the very unique Alpinist in my hands, albeit a tumultuous journey to get there. Now, the Alpinist's one Achilles heel is its thickness. At 13.5 millimeters thick with a case that doesn't quite hide its girth well, makes it really hard to wear on a NATO strap. That's why I've got it on the green zero pass, meaning nothing under the case. That reminds me, we just got a shipment of 18 mil straps because so many of you had asked for 18 mil. So if you like the NATO look without the NATO bulk, check out the Anachronist shop after the video. Okay, you've waited long enough. The actual watch I re-added to my collection was, drumroll, the Yunha's Max Bill, the OG 38 millimeter. Look, I think if you have a collection of more than a few watches, you probably should have a dress watch. You know, in case you have a formal function to go to, or if you're just feeling fancy one day. And let me make the case that there is no better dress watch for the dollar than the Max Bill. See, I owned a Max Bill early on. It was actually about 5 years ago when I made my first video praising the Max Bill. That was the first video on this channel that got widespread traction because I think a lot of you German fans were chiming in the comments. I actually didn't sell that watch. I learned my lesson from the Alpinist, but one of my good friends was graduating from architecture school, so I gave him the watch as a present because, come on, can you think of a better watch for an architect? I missed the watch immediately, and in the interim, I had bought a Max Bill chronoscope. But to be honest, it just didn't quite scratch the itch. Even though it had a similar style, the watch was bigger, more complex, it just kind of got away from the essence of Bauhaus for me, which was simplicity. So this time, back to basics, and not even a date to interfere with the dial. But Yunhan's, since I last owned this watch, has made one important change, which we'll come back to. But look, for about $1,500, you're getting a lot of watch. First, you can't say Max Bill without talking about design. This was an art school started by German designers returning from the First World War. These guys, they were ambitious. Their goal was to change the world through design, because I guess the war was pretty rough. The plan was to tear up the old rulebooks and start from scratch. See, what preceded Bauhaus was an overly ornamental movement called Art Nouveau. And these guys, they kind of in reaction started to play with basic shapes and primary colors. And the result was a fundamentally new theory of design that to simpletons like me meant things like minimalism or form follows function. And in that vein, the Max Bill watch has two dial variants, one with just simple stick hour markers, but this one with Arabic numerals. I've always liked this one because it's just a slightly more complex design, and the former simpler design just feels like it's been copied to death by brands like Daniel Wellington. On the dial are two numeral tracks, the inner one with hours and the outer one for minutes. There's a lot of lines and dashes, which might seem like a busy layout, but things are spaced in a way that's really pleasing. That's kind of the beauty of Bauhaus design. They just get spacing. And all of this is printed on a silvery white dial for that high contrast aesthetic. But who was Max Bill? He was one of the original disciples of the Bauhaus school, and their philosophy wasn't just to train students in one trade. Rather, they learned all the disciplines. Max Bill emerged designing everything from buildings to the furniture that lives inside them. But his most famous work has to be the collaboration with Junghans. See, Max Bill's grandfather was a watchmaker, so it was only fitting that it was like in his genes to do this collab. His first work was actually a wall clock in 1956, which then morphed into the Max Bill watch in 1961. You can see just how little the design language has changed in the intervening 70 years. Now, I hear this criticism a lot. If this design is so ubiquitous today, why not save your money and buy a cheaper knockoff? Well, the beauty of the Max Bill watch is in its details. Details that really reveal themselves over like weeks and months. And I'll just highlight a few of them. For example, the case is 38 by 10, but it wears more like an 8mm because of its saucer-like shape. The bottom half of that UFO is made of stainless steel, which is fat in the middle and tapers to a thin edge. You can find Max Bill's signature on the polished case back. Now, from the top down, you can hardly see a bezel because the entire top half of that dome is the crystal. Now, I told you one thing that Junghans had changed, and that's the material of the crystal. See, back in the day, this was made of acrylic with a hardened coating over it. Many times that coating would start to chip off, and it was kind of like the kiss of death. You'd have to swap the crystal out at that point. Junghans has since figured out how to mill sapphire into an identical dome shape. And I mean really thin and high domed, just like acrylic would. And it'd be hard to tell the difference side by side between this and the old watch, except for some subtle differences. See, sapphire is heavier. The old watch was so light, it felt almost cheap. This one has enough heft befitting a luxury product. The sapphire is also a bit more clear and transparent so that you can see that dial better. And lastly, when you feel the temperature of sapphire off of the wrist, it'll be colder to the touch. But the most important thing is that the shapes are the same. Another detail I love is if you look closely at that dial, it's actually curved as it approaches the edge, following the curvature of the crystal. Look even closer, you'll see that the second hand does the same curve at its tip. Now, the hour and minute hands are simple sticks, but there's actually a sliver of loom in them, as well as loom pips at the 4 cardinal directions, doubled up at the 12. Running the Max Bill is the J800 movement, but it's essentially just the ETA 2824, a Swiss workhorse known for its thinness, beating at 4 Hz with 38 hours of power reserve. More importantly, it will be a breeze to service when time comes. On the supplied supple black leather strap with a signed buckle, this watch is just easy to wear. It's so confident in its own skin. The watch that wouldn't look out of place with a suit or something more casual. Easily slipping under sleeves, not only because of its thinness and that curvature, but also because of the lugs. They're tiny. They're so small that each lug extends the case by just 1 millimeter, making this 38mm watch have a lug to lug of just 40. Look, I can go on for days about this watch, but the big picture is it's pretty hard to find a watch in the $1,000 to $2,000 range today with a Swiss movement that is just dripping with this much iconic design and history. Max Bill, the designer, he's up there with the likes of Johnny Ive and Dieter Rams, names that belong in college industrial design course books. To call the Max Bill watch a simple dress watch, I think is doing it a disservice. It's so much more than that. And I'm just happy that it's back in the collection. And this time, I'm not gonna give it to anyone. But guys, what's a watch that you've bought twice? Or is there a watch in your collection that you would never sell? If you want to continue chatting, come join us on the new Anachronist Discord channel. The invite is in the description. All right, guys, see you next time.